Hello and welcome to another episode of the Move Talk Thrive podcast with Em and Lizzie. We're here with you today.
Yes, so exciting. And we've got a fantastic guest today.
Yes, we would love to welcome Stephanie Pinto or Steph to the podcast. Welcome, Steph.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
I'm just going to read your bio out quickly so everybody has a little bit of background about who you are. So, Steph is a multi-award winning emotional intelligence specialist and international speaker. She is the author of the best-selling book From Chaos to Connection and host of the Emotionally Intelligent Parenting podcast, which if you're a parent, I highly recommend listening to it. It's one of my regular podcasts. Stephanie founded the global online community Let's Raise Emotionally Intelligent Kids in 2019. And since then, her social media platforms have collectively amassed over 250,000 followers. She's also the co-founder of two annual international parenting conferences, Chaos to Connection and Raising a Resilient Child. Stephanie is the emotional intelligence mentor for Australia's Nurture Parenting magazine and regularly contributes to publications such as Guide and Grow, Kiddipedia, and Teachers Matter. She has received awards for her work with prestigious organizations such as Women with Altitude and Oz Mumpreneur. Congratulations. And she is also an accredited pediatric anxiety therapist and former speechy or speech pathologist. She currently lives in Sydney, Australia with her family, and I'm sure we're going to hear much more about your life and story as well. So happy to have you here.
Thank you guys for having me on. It's a pleasure. I absolutely love that I get to speak to two therapists about this stuff that I love, and I love that you're a speechy as well. And so we'll have some good conversations.
I'm Lizzie Dawson, Australian exercise physiologist.
I'm Emily Mackey, Australian speech pathologist,
And this is the Move Talk Thrive podcast.
Yeah, just take it back a sec. I wanted to ask you, how did you go from being a speechy to now being an emotionally intelligent parent coach? How did that transition happen? And what has your career looked like in a nutshell?
Yeah. Okay. So I was a speechy for about 10 years and towards the end, not because of the profession, but because of the workplace I was in, I think, and just the changes, the NDIS had come in and things like that a few years prior. So it was a big change and I was sort of burning out in a way, I think. And I had just discovered online, as you do, through my networks, someone was doing emotional intelligence and posting about it and consulting and coaching. And I was like, what is this? Why is she talking about emotions? And I was really surprised. But then the more I just, you get fed posts and the whole algorithm thing, and I found it fascinating. And so I loved this concept of being smart with our emotions, or being able to understand and better manage emotions in ourselves and in kids and partners. So I was captivated, and long story short, I kind of made the transition. I think I was on mat leave with my second. No, I had just finished mat leave with my second. And so I took the chance to start. I was doing part-time as a speechy, and then basically, built a business around coaching parents in emotional intelligence.
So good. How good's maternity leave for starting new projects? I just love it. I love that we've all done that.
That's what we've both done that. Me and Lizzie have done that as well.
Oh, yes. So good.
So I think we actually connected. Is your daughter's name Evie?
Her name's Eve.
Eve, yes. And my daughter's name's Evie. Now that you're saying that, I'm like, I remember back because we connected a few years ago on Instagram and things like that.
Wow.
And did you just before, did you think that being a parent has catapulted you to change? Or I guess you said you were feeling a bit burnt out, but to make a career shift after 10 years, that's a really big deal. Were you what were your feelings around that? Was it hard or?
Yes. So I had no concept of emotional intelligence whilst I was a speechy. I actually actively really struggled and disliked the kind of what we then called, I think, positive behavior support part of being a therapist. I was a good clinician, but I never actually felt like I struggled with anxiety all throughout my childhood and teenage years and into my 20s as my career as a speechy. So I felt like a fraud when I had kids in my sessions who I could not motivate or engage, to do the activities that we were doing. And I just thought this was my plan. We have like 5 activities, let's get through them. And also I struggled to support the parents when their kids were not cooperating or not interested or engaged. I was like, I don't know what to do, especially when kids started to get frustrated or I guess disengage or get upset and things like that. And I was like, I have 0 skills. I'm a speechy. I'm here to teach you like how to say an R. So yeah, it was really becoming a parent, huge. Oh my gosh, isn't that just like your whole world shifts?
Yes.
And so that was a big moment where I was like, oh, I have this like new awareness now. And I had almost like a new set of skills because I was just, doing it with my kids. But I often think, man, I wish I had this understanding of emotions and behavior when I was a therapist, because it would have made my sessions a lot more enjoyable and a lot more productive, and I think a lot more beneficial. Not saying that I was an awful therapist, but I would run into roadblocks and be like, oh, I'm stuck. Does that make sense?
And that's why we're here today.
Yes.
And that's why me and Lizzie wanted to talk to you, because you have now become such an expert in emotional intelligence as you've sort of progressed in that angle of your career. And me and Lizzie are in the same situation where we, I think your behavior is such a major component of teaching children. It doesn't matter what you're teaching them, whether you're teaching them exercise or speech or language, you have to be able to, have a regulated child in front of you, that their mind, they're feeling safe and secure and they're open to learn. And so that is like the basics of being able to be a therapist. And I feel like at uni, no one really teaches you how to do that with your children. They might say, here's some strategies, create rapport, but what does that even mean?
Yeah.
And then you're then in the real world, like you were saying, and it's like, what do I do? I found that becoming a mum, I then found you, because I found like I'd have some situations with Evie and I was like, yelling is not working. She's laughing at me while I'm yelling. This is a really unsafe situation and I feel completely out of control and I'm not sure what to do about it. And I remember sitting there thinking, there has to be a better way to do this. Like I cannot be a parent because this is not me. This is not who I want to be. And so then I started getting into, like, I found a few other resources and I was like, what is this concept of emotional intelligence with parenting, right? And so then coming back to work full circle, I'm like, oh, when my therapist asks me questions, I'm like, well, what about this strategy? Or what about this strategy, which is kind of a parenting strategy that I learned, but it can be then put into an emotionally intelligent behavioral strategy. And so I'm like, why did I wait to become a mum to do this with my own children, to then be able to do this in therapy? And that's not the way it should be. We should be able to be using these techniques or strategies or even having an understanding of emotional intelligence without becoming a parent. We don't need to wait.
Oh, I'm so glad you said that. And I have so many like light bulb moments popping off in my head. If I can go back to when you said they don't teach us this stuff at university, oh my gosh, that was like I felt that in my core. I was like, why don't they teach now? When you don't know what you don't know, right? When I was a therapist, I didn't realize, I was like, this is just hard. I'm just not, I'm good with the speech stuff, but the behavior, but now I think, why don't we get taught this in university? Like this, it's almost because I think maybe it's like intangible and you can't really measure, but it's like connection with kids. It's dealing with emotions and it's, like you said, regulating them. I didn't get taught that. It wasn't like, it was all the other clinical stuff. And I often say to friends, I'm like, if you ask me anything about the head and the neck, I'm good. But anything below there, I have no idea.
You can ask Lizzie for that.
Yeah. So, and I often say to parents that I coach now or I speak to, I'm like, why aren't we teaching this stuff, emotional intelligence stuff, and dealing with emotions and behavior positively? Why didn't we get taught that as kids in homes from our parents, so that now we don't get to, maybe we're in our 30s or 40s and then we learn about it in a workplace, professional development thing, and they get someone in to talk about it. I'm like, no, let's just make this a part of normal culture or a normal way of being in therapy centers, but also, just in homes. So it's so like, I think it just would have absolutely catapulted my sessions and my connection with my kids, my, clients. And yeah, it's, I mean, you can't turn back the clock, obviously, but now this stuff is on people's radar a little bit more. And there are podcasts like yours, which are incredible, because now therapists get to learn and hear about these kind of approaches. So huge thank you for like doing what you're doing. I just love it.
It's so big, isn't it? Because if we can't engage a child, which this is all part of, then we can't do our therapy. We can't, perform any of the interventions that we need to. And I really think that, as an exercise physiologist, we don't get taught about anything in pediatrics. So I find that I get through kind of the clinical content, but the biggest thing, and like I say at Kids Heart Pilates, our queen bee role is engagement, because if we can't engage them, then we can't get them to move. We can't, work our magic. So, and it's honestly one of the top questions I get from mentees is engagement. Like, how do we engage kids? And it's about, managing their regulation, so they're in a place to learn and be receptive to what we're doing. So I just think it's so important, and I love that we're having this chat today.
Yeah, you know what? So you guys will probably know lots of OTs. I still have lots of OT friends, and I will often say to them, part of me wishes I was an OT, because the amount of knowledge they have around building this, like the regulation and the connection, the ability to help kids to connect and cooperate, and then to be open in that space for learning. I'm like, this would have been very helpful. Thank you very much. If I just got it, if I knew that, but I didn't. So yeah, amazing for parents, amazing for clinicians, I think. So it's something that I wish was a household kind of, a household word or concept, just emotional intelligence, and which at the base of it is, like you said, connecting with the kids and building that rapport and that relationship. Like the relationship, if you don't have that, you don't have anything else, as you said.
Yeah.
Once you've got that, kids in therapy sessions, kids in homes are much more open to being cooperative and to being, to taking things on and giving things a try and things like that. I just think if we don't have it, it's like a brick wall sometimes.
And that's what it feels like as a parent, but also as a therapist. But as a therapist, then you've got the expectation, like you've got a bit of pressure. Sometimes you can put on yourself to be like, I need to be achieving this goal. I need to be working through this activity. Like, yeah.
And you get that fraudulent feeling, that imposter. It's like, I should know how to do this, but we're not taught it. So, you've
got to learn, and you've got to like go to different sources and listen to this podcast, right?
Yes.
So I guess, like, just to start super basic, do you have like a definition, or if someone says to you, what is emotional intelligence? What does that mean? What's the answer?
Yes, I do. And I have two. One's a really quick and easy one, which it's a bit of a tongue-in-cheek kind of explanation, I guess. But I'll go through the more in-depth one. The kind of quick way I explain it to people is that being emotionally intelligent is being smart with your emotions. When a lot of us were not raised to do that, we were not raised understanding our emotions. We're actually raised to kind of shove them down, put them away, sweep them under the rug, deal with them behind closed doors, leave them at the door and come to work. You get the picture, right? So it's being smart with our emotions, and there's a whole load of things that go with that. I kind of also like to note that it means being smart or intelligent or aware of our kids or our partners or our husband, like their emotions as well, because everyone is built, like we're human, we're built on emotion, right? So the more in-depth, I guess, explanation is that emotional intelligence is the ability for us to be aware of our own emotions and those of others in the moment, which is really freaking hard to do sometimes, and to use that information to guide our actions, to make good decisions, and to adjust our behavior when we need to. So there's lots in there. The kind of pieces that I pick out are that I need to be aware of my own emotions, my own emotional state. And we talked a bit about regulation. So I love the idea of the nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, and how regulated or dysregulated we are as a parent or as a therapist. So knowing my own emotions, but also understanding and having an awareness of the other person's emotions in the interaction. So it could be a child in a therapy setting. It could be my husband at home, right? It could be my mother-in-law. So I have to, and this is not easy, guys. Like, oh, this is hard. I have to be able to accept and honor that the other person's emotions and experience in the situation is as true for them as mine are for me. Because no one, if someone tries to come in and like, say it's not that hard, just get it done, or it's not a big deal, just quickly, she didn't mean it was an accident. Like we can feel really invalidated and pissed off, but it's, so often we inadvertently do that to maybe a child or someone else, and we say it doesn't matter, it's not itchy, just wear it, or it's not too hot, just eat it, or this is a fun game, let's just play it. So we have to really have that awareness that other people's emotions and experience are as true for them as ours are for us. And so honoring and I guess balancing mine and that other person's, that can, well, like we said, that can make or break interactions and relationships. Like at the grand scale, think about separation and divorce and things like that. Like it can make or break things. And in a therapy session, it can make or break, like the plan can go out the window if we don't have that. Let's say a child is getting really stressed or frustrated because of a challenging activity. If we're not picking up on that, and like me, I was probably like, no, but we have to get this done and then we can do the Connect 4. Then I'm going to miss these cues. I'm going to stick with my plan. I'm not going to see that the child isn't receptive and change course, and bring the session back on track. And yeah, it's quite, I guess, invalidating and stressful for that child. So anyway, there's a lot in there, but I hope that kind of
I love that. I love that. I think it's so important. Like I'm just listening to you and I'm like, this is so important, within the therapy, with the children and with the parents in therapy, but also, within teams, like when we're all working together, I feel like it's so important, because we're all busy and we're all potentially having reactions to different things. I think that is just so valid in that situation. And then I work a lot in early childhood centers and childcare settings. And so I think it's really valid for early childhood educators as well. Like that's a huge one, I think. And for me, like when we're going in as a health professional, sometimes it can be a really hard one to crack going into an early childhood setting. But I feel like, and I don't know whether this is, I don't know where it's kind of come from in me, but I'm always like, they're having a really intense day. So what their behavior is not kind of directed at me. How can I help them? And, and I think it's just because I've worked in childcare centers for so long and seen that, but I think that's, really important, particularly for what we do, is just taking those different perspectives on board in so many different settings.
Oh, okay. So I love that you said, being around so many kids and for so long, you realize that if a child's having what we might call a challenging behavior or being uncooperative, we cannot take that personally, because we have no idea. Maybe sometimes we have a tiny slice of the of seeing kind of what's under the iceberg, so to speak, what's causing that child's big emotions or challenging behavior. And if we're going to take it personally, oh my gosh, like that just defeats the kind of purpose of being there for the child, to support them and to help them learn and grow and things like that. But it's a thing that I think a lot of us struggle with. It's just, it can be so it's like a habit that we take another person's emotional state, or I'm thinking of my husband and my kids, like we take another person's emotional state and we reflect it personally on ourselves. Like they're upset at us, or they're angry at what we just said, or they think we're silly, or or something like that, that we're not doing a good job. We take things personally so often. It's almost like a brain habit that we have. And that, again, can really damage interactions. It can damage relationships. So if we can try to notice that is just a thing that our brain does, like I want to depersonalize it. This is something I talk to a lot of people about in terms of just the emotional intelligence of it, if we can tune into the emotions that we're feeling, like embarrassed or ashamed or frustrated or angry, hurt maybe, can we notice that we've got that reaction, and can we pull ourselves out of the story that we're telling ourselves about that child who's just spat in our face, or, you know, where they've just said no, or I don't want to, or I hate you, like something that could be really easily taken personally. If we can just sort of have this almost like a separation, your emotions are yours. I don't know the extent of what your day has been like, how much sleep you've had, your gut health, your blood sugar levels, you know, what's going on at home kind of thing, and have that separation between our own emotions and our own response or reaction, so that we're going, whoa, okay, that's brought something up in me, but I know in my, like, if I peel back the layers, that child is not, even though sometimes they say, I hate you, or you're the worst, or this is boring, you know, even when it seems really personal, it is not, right? It's them having a reaction to the situation. It's them having an under construction brain, which means they do not have the sophisticated hardware, I guess, for emotional regulation, for mature language to say, I don't want to play that, or I just played it before, can we do something else? You know, I don't have that going on. So we have to, I guess in a nutshell, not take those behaviors personally, so that we can still show up as the person that child needs, the clinician or the therapist or the parent, but we can show up as what they need, which is the best version of ourselves, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And also just maintain our energy. Like, how exhausting to be constantly, you know, feeling personally
Triggered.
reactive. Yeah, triggered. And I feel like this as a parent, everything that happens with my children, it's triggering, you know, my inner child and my difficulties as a child. And I think, you know, that's something that I've had to practice. And, you know, I think, you know, one of the main reasons why we're here, because Em and I have had these insights as parents, because I think that, you know, you're kind of forced to go, okay, pause. What is this triggering inside of me?
Yeah, because otherwise it's an emotional roller coaster. Children have, I mean, this is the beauty of children. Like, they don't hold grudges. Like, you know, when they're very young, I don't know how, if it obviously it changes when they get older, but my oldest is 4. So it's like one minute she's so happy, and then the next minute it's like angry, but then that anger is very easily forgotten. And then the next minute it's happy again. And then the next minute fighting with her sister. So if you were reflecting that, you would just feel like you're on an absolute emotional roller coaster, which would be so draining. And as a therapist, we see children back to back, you know, a 30-minute, 40-minute, 60-minute session. If you were reflecting every child's emotions, and bearing in mind that we have children are coming to see an allied health professional not because that they are on track with their development. They are having difficulties, they've got delays, disorders. So it's even more intense.
They're vulnerable, right?
So you can imagine if you were doing that as a therapist, which a lot of therapists do, because we are prone to have more empathy and compassion. That's what makes us a good therapist. But it's putting boundaries in place. Me and Lizzie did speak about that, I think in season 1 was an episode of how we sort of have the healthy boundaries there. But obviously emotional intelligence is an important component of that, because you're, like you said, you've got the separation and you're understanding the emotion, pulling yourself out of the situation and saying, this is reflective of the child, not reflective of me. I just want to go back. So you said before that children, when they're younger, like, they don't have the skills or the cognitive ability. Is there so obviously we have children in our clinic from 18 months of age. Lizzie may be a little bit older.
Younger. We work with nursery and childcare centers.
Yeah. So at what age, like, do you expect a child, like, is there some sort of information about the brain development with the emotions and the emotional intelligence? Like, what age are we looking at that it's there?
Good question. Okay, so the response that I give when people ask, okay, so when is my child developing emotional intelligence, or when should they, a big one also is, when should they develop empathy, which is kind of that ability to be aware of and understand other people's emotions and what that means for them and things like that. And what I usually want to get across to people is that first off, emotional intelligence is this complex, almost like set of skills. There are actually 26 individual competencies, if you will, or little sub skills that make up emotional intelligence. And that's at least that was what I was taught as I was trained and accredited as an emotional intelligence coach and consultant. 26, and some of them are resilience, some of them are communication, some of them are self-awareness, emotional strengths, stress management, team building, bonding, relationship management, things like that. So there's lots of different kind of skills that make it up. And you can imagine that the other part of this is that kids are so, as humans actually, humans are so unique and individualized that, and now we know so much more about neurodiversity as well, that it's almost impossible, and I think kind of defeating to think, okay, is there, like, because we train under a milestone, we learn milestones as species, right? Are there milestones for emotional intelligence or for empathy? And I go, please let that concept go if you're a clinician or a parent, because most of the time what that will kind of pull you in towards doing and thinking is that, oh, this child didn't share, or was selfish, or got really upset when I gave them the blue sword for the Papa virus, not the red one. And oh no, they're 5. They should be able to handle disappointment or, problem solve. And I think let's move away from what should this child be doing, and let's move more into what can I support this child with their understanding and management of emotions and social skills that go along with emotional and social skills, right? So letting go any kind of idea, like I've had to do it for my 2 kids, especially my youngest, because she's the second. So I often catch myself going, I don't think your brother was doing this when he was 7. My kids are 7 and 10. So I still fall into that trap of thinking, should they be doing this by now? And should they be like, my 10-year-old will have beautiful moments of insight, and we can have amazing conversations, and he can deal with not getting that thing he wants, and disappointment so well sometimes. And then you catch him on another day, like the very next day, and he's melting down because he's banged his knee twice at soccer and there's a bruise forming and the kid did it on purpose. Like it's wild, the variation and the fluctuation, I should say, of almost like emotional skills or emotional regulation and the capacity of that. And the last thing I will say is that we're all adults here. We're, in our 30s and beyond. So this means our brain is fully developed, because we know the brain is only really fully developed in the late 20s, so towards 30. And still, even us adults, like I should have a fully developed set of emotional intelligence skills, empathy, communication abilities to regulate my emotions and to problem solve. Man, on some days, I just cannot muster it. I act like a 5-year-old and I dig my heels and I'm like, no, I don't want you to do that, and stop it. And I raise my voice. So we all have moments where I guess the skills that we have or are still developing kind of just fall by the wayside, and we have one of those days. So
Totally.
yeah, that's my answer.
All the time. I feel like my kids could behave the same way all week, and one day I'll be totally calm and it won't bother me, and then the next day I'll be in tears and I'll be screaming. Like I just know when I've had a hard day at work, or I'm just not, bad sleep or whatever, my ability to cope with stress, particularly with kids, is just, like so much lower.
And that's the same with kids, right?
Yeah. I think it's actually really helpful to remind ourselves, especially as clinicians, that we have no idea what the night before has been like for a child. We don't know whether, let's say, grandma's been in hospital for a week, so everyone is really worried about that. Their favorite teacher has been away for 2 days. So their friend is moving overseas. They haven't had anything to eat because they didn't have any, milk left in the fridge, so no cereal. Like, we don't know all these things that kind of I describe as being under the iceberg, that then kind of all mixed together in this melting pot of like the child's nervous system state. And then they come into the therapy session, and what we see is the tip of the iceberg, the behavior where they're uncooperative or they're a bit silly, they're not their usual self, or they seem upset over the littlest thing, and we think, well, what is going on? Like, why is this kid being so silly or rude? But actually we're seeing kind of the manifestation of maybe 20 things that are just bubbling under the surface. So I wish I knew that, because I probably would have been a lot more understanding, but also flexible in my therapy sessions. I wouldn't have been so rigid with my plan. We've got this, you usually like these activities, so come on, let's go. And I would have been able to go, you know what, swipe that off the desk. Let's play today, and let's see what we can get done. Let's just connect and enjoy the time.
Connect over clinical.
Yeah,
I like that.
Yeah, that's good. And I think I'd like to talk about that a bit more in depth, like of what clinicians can do. But just to back up one more time, so I guess we'd classify behavior, right? You either have like a child who is behaving, I don't know how to say this like well, I'm sure you can correct me, but a child that is behaving well, and then a child who might be having challenging behavior. Is that right? Like you've sort of just got two like versions there of a child, like when we're talking about behavior, is it two versions of behavior?
I know what you mean, and I struggled so hard. I was like, how do I describe, because I want to be respectful in describing or explaining a child's or a person's behavior, not to kind of have a really negative lens, like they're misbehaving or they're being naughty. So I've had to get myself out of that language, which is not easy. But I kind of see it as, I guess, a bit of a spectrum, in that I always relate it back to myself or us adults, because we can reference that we're adults, right, as clinicians. And I think, on any given day, I could be at my absolute worst, where I'm like, I don't even want to get out of bed. The world hates me. Like, I'm just not there today. Or I can be bright, shiny button on top of the world. My kids could be arguing, and I'm like, as you said, Lizzie, super calm. We can get through this. Guys, come on, let's solve the problem. And then I can be anywhere in between based on all of the things that are going on under my iceberg. So I think the same for kids coming into therapy rooms. And I think we don't know. Sometimes we don't know. Like, how often would we get a phone call saying, oh, like, Lincoln today is, he's had a bad night. So, like, probably never. And also when they come in, we might not even be able to, or we might not have time with a parent who says, hey, just letting you know X, Y, Z has happened. When they do, that's awesome. But a lot of the time we don't. So we're just going in blind. But yeah, we can either have kids who are what I call, like, colloquially, in the green zone, where they're cooperative. And I think, as you said, kind of behaving well, cooperative, they're engaged, they're receptive, they're listening, they're ready to learn, go a little bit outside their comfort zone or window of tolerance. Like, that's a great place. Selfishly, that's a great place to have kids. But then any spectrum of from there to, they're shut down. So they're uncooperative. They don't even want to try the activity. Maybe they've gone quiet, or they're just sitting in the corner, or they're not engaging at all, or anything we do try, maybe there's an erupting. It's almost like an inward, or they go outward. Do you know what I mean? And I think it's just depends on the child and their personality and what is going on with them under the surface. But we can definitely have some very challenging and uncooperative behaviors where we think, oh, now we've got to pull on all our strategies. And like, therapists are so amazing at doing that, but you're right, it's draining to be able to do that all the time. Whew.
Particularly if you're, if you don't have that emotional awareness, I guess, of yourself and being aware of, how this is making you feel, and being able to almost talk yourself off the ledge of going, this is to do with me, I think. So I think if, particularly like with new grads, they're not going to have those skills. They're already feeling a little bit like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm winging it here. Totally. And so then if they're having like an engagement issue, they're going to feel like this is a them thing. So I think, I always say to my team, particularly new grads, you know, that connection piece is the most important, and just lower your expectations.
Yeah.
Like, let's all just lower expectations on ourselves and the kids, because we're working, you know, with a complex demographic, I guess.
Yeah. And in doing that, when you let go of the expectations of your 30 or 60-minute session and you just prioritize connection and relationship, oh my God, like best case scenario, within 5 minutes, you have a child who's engaged, receptive, open, and then you're back on track. But well, I don't want to say worst case, but like, you know, if that doesn't work, at the very least, you are maintaining and slowly building on this connection and that relationship you have with the child, which, as we just said, like you might be seeing a child for weeks or months or more, right? But you're building those foundational blocks that you need in order to maybe in a next week or next session, then to have them want to come back to therapy and also to come in the door feeling like safe, and, you know, they can have a bit of fun and things like that. So I don't see it being a waste at all of a session if our session plan goes out the window and then we have this half hour or this beautiful time of just connecting. I know it's going to look, you know how many comments we used to, or I used to at least get of like, are you just playing with them? I'm like,
yes, I was gonna
yes,
say that. Yeah.
I am. But I think that is absolutely gold. And I think that is so valuable, because with my kids at home and with my husband, if our relationship isn't solid, if we don't have that trust and that I get them and I listen to them and I want to hear what they have to say, like if I'm not prioritizing that bond and relationship, I can't, they're not going to cooperate with it. They're not going to be, I can't persuade them to like get in the car, we've got to go. I can't encourage them to brush your teeth because, you know, come on, no, they'll be like checked out.
Yeah.
So,
it's relationships 101, isn't it?
Yeah. I often say emotional intelligence, this work I do with kids and parents or with therapists, I'm like, guys, this is relationship tools for anyone, like even in the workplace. This stuff it's like $1 million industry in teams and organizations doing emotional intelligence training. I'm like, wow.
Yeah. I mean, being business owners, we can totally understand why. Do you ever feel like, so because a lot of our the speechies or NEPs, you see the child once a week, or sometimes twice a week if you're really lucky. And we do have a lot of complex children or children that are from various backgrounds. So we have, you know, children in foster care, or like you said, there is a lot of tension at home. There's a lot of issues. If we are prioritizing like emotional intelligence in our sessions and that connection, does it get undone then by like, so because you're prioritizing that relationship with them, and then because like sometimes you can feel like you're fighting an uphill battle because the child just comes in, they've just had a horrible week because there's so much, like it really has nothing to do with the child, it's everything that's happening with the family at home. They come into the therapy session, then you will work with them, you know, taking away your routine, your plan, then you'll build up that connection, and then they'll come back the next week and you've got to do it again. Do you feel like it gets to a point where do we then have to work with our parents, or how do you navigate that situation?
Ooh, so as you were saying that, actually, Emily, I was thinking, you know what? We can be creating, and I think a lot of you guys are creating this oasis with kids like that who are experiencing that really challenging, stressful dynamic at home or in the classroom or elsewhere than the therapy room. So I think that is really important to recognize and almost like give ourselves this compassion and this grace and gratitude, I want to say, because for some kids, this is like a shining highlight of their week. And the other part of that is, I don't think it's, if we think, yes, we're sending them back to a home or to sometimes a classroom, I would do school visits and I'd be like, oh my goodness, this child's going back into a classroom where they're full of like behaviorism and rewards and tickets and tokens, and that's stressing them out. And I would think, yeah, but if I go, well, you know, it's a drop in the ocean, what am I gonna, what I'm doing mattering? Like, is that mattering? I think on the flip side of that though, is like, well, if I don't, then this child has not none, but you know, they have almost no space where it is like an oasis, where they do feel seen, heard, important and like they matter and like they're getting listened to. Do you know what I mean? So I think that in itself, like we have no idea what it's like at home for these kids or at school and what they're finding challenging. But if they feel all those things with us in the session, oh man, it is so worth it, right? We're also kind of, I think, showing them what's possible. Like this is what it can be like in a relationship, and this is how to navigate, these other challenging, tricky emotions that you might have at other times. So yeah, sometimes it will feel like an uphill battle, and I don't want people to get discouraged because it's still so important. Yeah.
I think
It's
as
not
well.
for the, oh, you go, Em.
Well, it's balancing it like with the clinical side. And I think without emotional intelligence and without thinking through it on a deeper level, sometimes a clinician might be tempted to be like, oh, I'm going to put you with a new clinician. Maybe they might get better results with you. But then if we're actually looking at it through an emotionally intelligent lens, that would probably potentially be quite harmful, because we're talking about connection and having that security with the child. So it's applying that to how you're looking at clinical decisions that you make. And also, like, a couple of my speeches have come to me and said, like, we're just making no progress with this child. Like, we're fighting an uphill battle. I think we need to stop therapy. And it's like, well, if you're looking at it from a purely clinical point of view with your goals, yeah, because you're not achieving what you need to, because every session they're having to strip it right back to play to create the connection and the safety. So I guess because we're dealing with emotions, we can never be like, oh, in 6 sessions, this child is going to be able to be coming in. And even though they've had all this trauma this week, they're going to be okay because you've done 6 sessions of play. And that's just the reality of working on the ground every day and working with different types of families and backgrounds, is that you have to, I guess, lower, like you said, Lizzie, lower your expectations when we're dealing with children like that. And I think having very clear communication with whoever the caregiver is as to what your plan is and what you're doing and your purpose. And then maybe
what your expectations are.
Yeah, but then like trying to put a plan in place where maybe you might do 2 sessions one day after the other. And the first day it's building the relationship with emotional intelligence, and the next day trying to do the clinical. Like, it's making clinical decisions like that from an emotionally intelligence perspective as well as the clinical perspective. Does that sound right?
Oh, yeah, I love that. And what came to mind as you were saying that, Em, was sometimes I think, and I did not have the awareness of this when I was a clinician, but thinking, do we need to get maybe a psychologist involved or on board so that they can, yes, we can, to an extent as a speechy or a therapist, communicate some of this to the parent. We've noticed that in the sessions, or we've noticed that, these emotions are coming up, and obviously we need to, and I want to deal with and support, I don't know, Jack through them, so that we can get through to doing our activities in our session. But, sometimes, as you said, sometimes that just, you spend so much time doing that. It's almost like, are we asking too much of like a speechy or an OT to be able to do that, and putting their other work or their clinical work on hold? Sometimes I think we can do that. Other times I think maybe we need to get someone on board who maybe also the parent might hear it differently from, because it's about psychology and emotion and behavior. And that might support, it's, obviously a multidisciplinary approach. But I love also your idea of maybe if we do a couple of sessions back to back, or, each day, or we do a small intensive, even that flexibility, I think, is so brilliant. Like, it's almost liberating, because so many of us have, or at least I had, this concept of, no, therapy is every week or therapy is every fortnight. And that does not work for every kid or for every family. So I think, it's great to be able to have some flexibility and lean on other professions when we think it's warranted.
Yeah. And I mean, that then comes in with regulation, right? Like, we'd work with the EPs or the OTs with the physical and the gross motor side of it, and then, or the fine motor, and then sort of working together to create that for that child. I think that's a key thing for our clinicians, is being flexible. And there's a lot of research coming out that says, or particularly in the area that I am specializing in, which is literacy. Oh, not literacy, sorry. It was literacy for the first 10 years. It's now language. But preschool language is saying that actually we can have sessions that are not every week. we need to be flexible with how we're approaching and teaching our children. And this is why we have to be individualized with our therapy. We have frameworks, but not one model works for each child. And that's an evidence-based approach, is looking at what's the scientific research, but then what's my clinical experience, and then what's the child doing sitting in front of me, what's the cultural background of the child, what is the issues, what's the home environment, and putting that all together to create that evidence-based approach to giving therapy. So flexibility is a key in that, I think. So that's
absolutely
a key component for clinicians to think of these days.
And can I say, like, how bloody hard is this for new grads to grasp and get their head around? I don't think I could have done it for like the first 5 years. It's just too complex.
No. And that's why it's important that you are in a work environment where you have proper, decent mentoring, that you have regular support, that you have one-on-one support, and that if you're not getting it, that you then ask for external supervision, or you enroll in Lizzie's program, or you enroll in my program, or you upskill or train yourself. But the work environment is key, and having an emotionally intelligent work environment, that's what you need as well.
Oh my gosh. I think that could be the difference between burning out or leaving the profession.
Exactly.
And just hating your job or loving it, is having the support, exactly as you said, from one or both of you guys, from your programs, from someone external to maybe your workplace. You might have it in your team as well. But this stuff is make or break. We can't work in isolation. Like, we're not silos, and we don't have all this beautiful knowledge and this just life experience that is needed for some of these complex kids. So I feel like almost making a bit of a call to action, if you're struggling, or if you're thinking this can't be it, or this is really hard, or I feel like we're blocked, oh my god, like, reach out to one of these beautiful people here, because we don't know what we don't know.
That's right.
I feel like I didn't know a lot.
Yeah, totally.
Well, you can come back to speech profession anytime, Steph. No, I would then say that the parents would have a huge loss. So if we're talking about some strategies that we could give therapists, like, I know there's lots of strategies that me and Lizzie use as parents. In our minds, it's been a little bit difficult to go, okay, what strategies? So, like, when we've been doing this, we've been implementing it in the context of the mum of the child. So, you have a certain responsibility. Whereas what strategies can we implement as a therapist, like not overstepping? I guess it depends on the child, right, and what they're doing. That's a very broad question, but yes. Any practical tips of how we can do this in our sessions?
Yeah. So are we talking about, there's a few different angles. How do we, as therapists or clinicians, manage our own emotional state and regulation? Or how do we connect and teach this to kids, or manage kids, maybe big emotions or strong emotions in the session? But then also the third one, how do we express this or communicate it to a parent who may have zero idea about emotional intelligence, or about understanding emotions, behavior, the brain, and their child, and things like that? So there's like three.
Where do you start?
Yeah.
What's
the best place to start? What would you say is the best place to start?
So good. Okay, that helps. The best place to start is with ourselves as a clinician, because we can't teach anything. What's that saying? You can't teach what you don't know, or we can't give what we don't have. We might be trying to calm a child, and inside we're like raging because we're like, oh my God, this is the third session today, and like, what is going on with, so to be able to focus on ourselves. And firstly, can we even acknowledge or notice when we're starting to like get elevated? And that might feel like we're starting to get irritated or agitated or stressed, whatever word goes with you, right? And what you use. But also, can we feel that in our body? Because stress is when we're getting upset or angry or disappointed, even, like, we are going to have certain levels of like cortisol and adrenaline flooding our system, right? In order to help us fight, flight, free, things like flee. So can we notice that is building in our body? Like, it's coming up, oh, it's 25% or 50, I'm at 50%. Like, I need to take a break, or I need to go to the bathroom, or I need to say, you know what, you play with that for a second, and I'm just going to pop out, or whatever we need to do. we can't do that if we don't even have an awareness of our emotions in our body and how those fluctuate, like moment to moment, as well as client to client and day to day. So I think that awareness first is really, really powerful. There's actually a really great, I like acronyms. There's a great acronym from Professor Mark Brackett, who is Yale University's founding director of the Center for Emotional Intelligence over in the US. One of his books is behind me, and it's called Permission to Feel. It's all about emotional intelligence. His acronym is RULER, which stands for R is, can we first recognize the emotions that we're feeling, or just the state in our body? U is for understanding, why are we feeling these certain ways? What's going on around us or in this interaction? So understanding that the child has just thrown the Lego at the window, and we're like horrified, connecting those two. I'm feeling this because that child has just done that. Non-judgmentally, might I say, not that that is always easy. L is for being able to label how we're feeling. So a lot of us have maybe 3 or 4 words in our emotional vocabulary: happy, sad, angry, stressed, and that's not even an emotion word. But we have like such a limited vocab that it actually is, it's unhelpful for us to be able to not, if we're like, oh my God, I'm really peed off, or I'm feeling crabby, actually I'm feeling really disappointed, or I'm feeling really hurt, or I'm feeling mad or angry, or exasperated. So L is for labeling, and there's a lot of research that supports it. An increased emotional vocabulary is also associated with the ability to quickly regulate and kind of calm those emotions. So L is for labeling. We could just do that to ourselves and notice how we're feeling. E is for expressing. So there's power in being able to express our emotions or how we're feeling in the right way, at the right time, to the right person. Not easy. Like, I still have to work on these things myself. So expressing it, I'm feeling really upset, or this thing has just happened and I'm feeling stressed about it, or I'm feeling nervous. And then the final R, this is kind of, I guess, the last step, is to regulate those emotions now that I get what's happening and why. So what can I do for myself as a clinician, maybe like right here, right now in the session, but also in my break or at home tonight when the day is done? What can I do to regulate myself, to let go of the stress or the anger or the hurt or whatever it is? What can I do to regulate these emotions so that I can process and release them, and then get on with my sessions for the afternoon, or enjoy my kids tonight at home? You know what I mean? So I know that's like a long-winded answer, but the RULER acronym I think is really easy to remember sometimes, really helpful. And it just brings us back to, instead of like, we're kind of in this cyclone of like emotion and stress or frustration, we can kind of center ourselves on, what am I feeling? Why? What can I do about it? And things like that. I think that has to start with us, but then we can teach in little bits. We could teach that to kids in sessions, right? You could pick one of those, and so yeah, there is lots we can do.
Emotional vocabulary. I like that. That could be easily a speech therapy goal. And I remember, I don't know where it was, but it was in one of my business coaching things that there was like a circle, and it was a diagram of emotions, and it was colored. And I think there was like maybe 2 or 3 layers. And it was like I don't know if you've seen that.
The emotion wheel. Yeah, I've got some on my website.
Yes, emotion wheel. I think that's a great resource for people if you're trying to extend your emotional vocabulary. Looking at that, because I remember studying that, like when I saw it, like I was just looking at it and I was like, oh, like these are just words that I'm like, oh wow, like would be like a really good word to use, or even for ourselves, I guess, as adults, looking at that and then modeling that for children.
Yeah,
you
could even have
in our sessions.
You could have like a kid's version of the emotion wheel on your wall somewhere. I've got a kid's emotion wheel on my website. I've got an adult one, which has over 100. Like, it's still the wheel. There's still 3 layers, but it's like full of words like exasperated and things. The kids one is obviously much more simplified. And then obviously we could find visual versions, which are, it's really hard. I'm on the fence with those, because I, as a speechy and a pediatric therapist at heart, I love visuals. And yet there's actually a lot of research now that's come out in maybe the last decade or so that is showing that we're actually, when we use simple emotion pictures, you know, like board maker and like pits for pecs and like just even cartoon images, that they're almost prescribing in a box what angry looks like. It's a furrowed brow and a scowl kind of face, but you can be angry and have a deadpan expression. You could be smiling and feeling really angry about what is happening.
So
There's
true.
actually so much, what's the saying, the variation is the norm. So when we do teach, I mean, it's kind of splitting hairs, but technically we shouldn't be teaching kids with like this one certain facial, you know, expression that this is angry, this is sad, this is happy, this is whatever, because I mean, that's not what all humans or kids look like when they're feeling certain emotions. Their skin might also be a different color. Their eyes might look differently. Some kids can, I mean, kids and adults, we can express emotions, like I said, very differently. We could be smiling but feeling really sad, or we could be crying tears of happiness. So it's a little bit controversial, but still, I think it's like, if you're teaching kids emotions, then that's great.
I think that's a really good point, because even like that's for neurodiverse children, they may not have any expression, but that doesn't mean they're not capable of feeling emotions and having those emotions. And
100%.
That's actually really funny that you say that, because obviously managing a team, there is one girl in my leadership team in particular, and we do have a running joke about it. But often I say to her, because I'm a very expressive person, and then you have to work with people who are not as expressive. My husband's like that, like they're not.
So is mine.
And so I'm always saying to him, like, as an adult, as myself, I'm like, I don't know if you're mad right now. I don't know if you're happy right now. And he's like, I'm really happy. And I'm like, well, you have a really weird way of showing it, because there's no expression on your face. And like in our meetings, I will say to this employee, I'll say, are you crying? And she's like, no, I'm really happy. I'm like, oh, sorry. Like your face was just, and I'll say to her, are you okay? And she's like, yeah. And then like, she'll be blank. And I'll be like, I thought you'd be more excited about this. And she's like, I am. So that's just a really, like that happens on a daily basis.
That's actually, I won't go into it because I know we're kind of rounding up at the end of the time, but we know from research that humans are notoriously, I won't say bad, well, we are, but inaccurate at detecting detecting emotions through facial expressions. So we think we can tell when someone is lying. We think we can tell when someone is sad, happy, or angry, or whatever. And a lot of the time, and this is cross-cultural as well, into different, like even untouched Amazonian kind of populations, we can't tell. We think we can, but we actually can't tell always how people are feeling. It depends a lot on our own, like you said, Em, our own emotional state in the moment, our own, like the context of the situation and what that usually means for us based on our life experience and everything that's happened from when we were born to today. So we are actually creating our emotional responses, and we're not detecting them in other people. We're creating, or what's the word? We're architecting, which is a neuroscientist, Lisa Feldman Barrett. This is her work around emotions. She has found that we're really, inaccurate at detecting how people feel, because we just base it on facial expression, but then also our own story that's attaching to what's going on right now. Like you said, aren't you excited? This is a really great thing for us. And she's like, no, I am, but you detected something different. So let's be careful with kids when we're teaching them happy is a smile, like these really old, they're, to be honest, outdated kind of methods and things like that. So it's just something to be, I would rather teach, because if people are like, okay, well, what do we do? I would rather ask lots of questions, get to know the child, and think, what does it feel like when things are going really really well for you, and you're playing with your friends, or you're having a birthday party? You know, would you use words like happy or excited, and how does that feel in your body, and how do you know? And do you have like a buzzy feeling, or do you have like a pit in your stomach, or does everything feel really heavy? Like we're kind of describing emotions and experiences in that way. So we're trying to find out what's true for them and then help them to put words to it. And that could be words like happy, sad, angry, mad, or whatever. But it could be like, I was going to say flighty, or like buzzy, or wriggly, or heavy, you know, things like that. So there's I don't want to, you know, there's a lot to it, but I think it's really interesting to think about.
Yes, and that's definitely, I think, a lot of food for thought there on the visuals that you're using, the resources that you're using, the way that you're teaching kids. Are you teaching emotional vocabulary? Like we will teach vocabulary of animals and, you know, all different types of things like that, food. But I think emotional vocabulary can be added in there and then teaching it with
totally.
real life experience rather than visuals, stock standard visuals.
Yeah.
How do we learn more from you? Because I'm like, oh, I feel like we're just getting like the tip
We'll
here.
have to have you on again.
Ooh, I would love, I feel like we could talk about so many different topics because it just interlocks really beautifully. The best places to find me are, my website is just my name, which is really easy, stephaniepinto.com. You can find my book on there. You can find it on Amazon as well. It's called From Chaos to Connection. So that is generally aimed at parents, but because I'm still in the therapist world a lot, I've had lots of clinicians and therapists read that and say, oh my God, it makes so much sense. I can use it at work and with my own kids. So that's on Amazon. And I have a community on Facebook called Let's Raise Emotionally Intelligent Kids. And then there's a few more, but I think the main one is Instagram. I'm at emotionally.intelligent.parent. So little clips and reels and stuff on there, which is cool.
And I think we've highlighted that this is not just for parents. Like, I think it's, you know, it's about relationships. You were saying it's for teen, like you just so easily crosses over. So I think, you know, this is definitely not just for parents, but also if you're working with parents, then, you know, like it'll be, I can't wait to get stuck in.
Yeah, like refer your parents, if you're seeing issues in your sessions, refer your parents to Steph's resources, because that is collaboration and will help you as well with helping your parents. And often all of our local parenting courses are full, you know, the free ones. So you've got things on your Instagram and things like that, which is how I first found you. And I always still find it very helpful. So parents will find it helpful, trust me. But thank you so much, Steph. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, your expertise, and your time with us. I'm sure our listeners are going to get so much value out of this. And if they want to connect with you more, they know where to find you.
Oh, thank you so much. I wish I had you guys when I was a therapist. I think my work would have been so much easier and so much more joyful. So I want to say a huge thank you just for doing what you guys are doing, because as therapists, I think we need support for ourselves personally, but also in business. And it's a gold mine that you guys are doing the work you do and have the programs you do and the podcast. Like, thank you.
Thank you.